It's lovely to be here. I'm really grateful for this invitation. And it's just fun to be with so many higher ed people. It's always a reminder of what a relatively small world we live in when we come to these things and we see so many old friends, make new friends. And also, as Artis said this morning, there's just no substitute for the human touch and the face-to-face. So I'm really, really pleased to be here. So let me begin this morning with the kind of widespread criticism that many of us hear on campus when the topic of AI comes up. I'm going to read you a really good example. It's a paragraph written by one of our most eminent professors. So I'm quoting, quote, "It will introduce forgetfulness into the soul of those who learn it. They will not practice using their memory because they're put their trust in technology, which is external and depends on signs that belong to others. You provide students with the appearance of wisdom, not with its reality. Your invention enables them to hear many things without being properly taught, and they'll imagine they've come to know much, while for the most part they will know nothing. And they will be difficult to get along with, since they will merely appear to be wise instead of really being so." Does that sound familiar? Yes? It's just the kind of thing you hear about AI. But the passage I just quoted is actually quite old. That eminent professor who was speaking was Socrates. The speech is found in Plato's dialogue, the Phaedrus, which was written almost 3,000 years ago. Now, Plato and Socrates were obviously not talking about AI. So what was the new technology that they were railing against? What was it that they were so worried about? It was writing, particularly the newer alphabetic writing in particular. We are so used to writing, we don't even think of it as a technology, but it absolutely is. Writing itself was probably already a few thousand years old, but for a lot of that time it was picture language, which made it clunky and inflexible and kept it in the province of specially trained scribes. The development of phonetic alphabets, of symbols that that substitute and stand for the sounds of language, that dramatically expanded what writing could do. It was a game changer. All of a sudden, anyone could learn to write fairly easily and quickly, and writing began to be part of the learning experience, inducing forgetfulness. You didn't have to memorize what the teacher said. You could write it down. You didn't have to know the authority who was giving you information because you could read it in a book. In the Phaedrus, Plato, through the speeches of his teacher Socrates, is highly critical of the ways the widespread use of this new technology is ruining education. It's making students stupider, it's killing off their memories, it fosters cheating, it allows ignorance to masquerade as knowledge. Socrates and Plato lived in the middle of a long period of radical technological change. It started with cuneiform picture writing, traveled through the development of alphabets, and maybe culminated in the invention of the printing press in 1440. Plato's sense that this new technology was going to turn education and everything else upside down was absolutely correct. The social practices of oral cultures, their arts, religion, their political structures, would mostly not survive the literacy revolution. From their historical vantage point, they could already see some of these losses, but they could not imagine the gains. Everything from modern science to the novel, to the daily newspaper, to journaling as a psychological practice, to the Protestant Reformation, to the special kind of deep thinking that writing well requires. All of that required widespread literacy and was unimaginable before it. As thoroughly literate beings, we can't imagine anyone being afraid that writing would ruin education or thinking. And yet, living on the cusp of our own technological revolution, we are afraid that, and do see the end, not just of what happens in the classroom, but of an entire way of life and the dawn of a new one. Now, I started with this story, and I remind you of this as a way of putting AI in a bigger context. Like Socrates and Plato, we live in the midst of a lengthy historical shift, a digital revolution. If Socrates and Plato lived in the midst of the emergence of the age of literacy, we are living in the emergence of the digital age. And like writing did, technology is changing our world and our minds in ways that are hard to grasp. These kinds of technological changes, as significant as literacy and digitalization, do more than change what we do. I have a footnote here where I talk about sort of the two other big technological revolutions in human history. The first one, I think many anthropologists would agree, was the mastering of fire. Right? When human beings learned to control fire. That was a very big deal. It changed everything about humans' lives. They could live in caves, for example. They could travel in groups. They could sit around the fire and tell stories. Not for a long time because they didn't have language yet. Fire was probably, I think they think 100,000 years ago. I'm sorry, 800,000 years ago, almost 1 million years ago. The other one I would put is the development of language, which was language as we know it, full-fledged human language, about 100,000 years old. So fire, language, writing, digital technology. There's a great deal of scholarship showing the ways these inventions, these technologies, changed human existence. Particularly, for example, the way that literate cultures foster an entirely different kind of thinking than oral cultures did. Happens at every level, including how our brains work. Literacy, for example, demands greater use of the parts of our brain that favor sequential reasoning, identifying the parts of something, analysis, over seeing the whole of it, and a flashlight beam of focused attention. The importance that oral cultures placed on concrete knowledge, on holism and wide gestalt, those things become much more marginal in literate cultures. Certain cognitive skills decline from underuse, while others become stronger. Digital technologies, and especially AI, are likely to have analogous fundamental effects. Are such changes for the better or for the worse? That is very tricky to say. We, in this room, and almost everybody we know, are the most literate people to ever have lived on Earth. Are we the happiest? Will human beings be happier as native AI users? My sense is that the changes that such revolutionary technologies produce are for the better and for the worse. We lose things and we gain things. None of us can predict the future, but we can draw lessons from this anthropological past. One thing history shows us is that technologies cannot create human happiness on their own. The things that matter most to us, feeling loved, being part of a community, finding meaning, using our creativity, none of those things are assured or prevented by technology per se. If we want to improve the overall experience of being human, there's no substitute for values and ethical action. Loving your neighbor, creating a family, making time for art, none of those things can be outsourced. Vast economic inequality, war, bigotry, injustice, those are the things that create immense suffering and can't be alleviated by technology alone. So while we're busy adapting to AI, we better be spending just as much time and energy on making our social systems fairer, less violent, and more just. A second lesson from history is that new technologies don't fully erase the old ones. We still enjoy oral recitations and meat grilled over an open fire. But they do change what seems normal and practical. If there are aspects of literate culture that we want to preserve, we need to pay attention to those things and really think about why they matter. Writing as a form of self-expression feels, I'm a writer, so that feels to me like worth preserving. Science, the novel, the depth of creative thought that writing well requires, yes. The 5-paragraph student essay, probably not. A third lesson from history is that the truly transformative technologies cannot belong to any one individual, to any social class, or any national group. They require generations of effort and invention to produce, and they're able to be widely distributed and manipulated. Fire, reading, language, these are cultural products that belong to humanity as a whole. We can briefly restrict them, preventing enslaved people from learning to read, for example, or insisting that the state owns the means of publication. But transformational technologies are transformational because they inevitably break through these bans. If AI is to inaugurate a new age, it will be because it lives and breathes in the hands of ordinary people. What happens among elites matters, of course, and by any standard, any global standard, all of us in this room are elites. But it's what happens when ordinary people get a hold of things that ultimately determines their impact. If we think we can control it, we're wrong. Finally, we can't forget that technology always requires a material substrate and hence a material cost. Harnessing fire meant ensuring it was well guarded, requiring energy and time from the members of the tribe. Job creation. Fire tender became a job, never had been before. But that left less time for leisure. Language as we know it couldn't develop until evolution had formed a more complicated mouth and airway process. Writing required clay and then parchment and then a whole lot of paper-producing trees. Digital technology may prove itself to be too expensive for widespread use unless we can't reduce the demands it places on water and finite energy sources. The human toll may be too high as well. How many people have to be sacrificed to the mind-numbing work of, I don't know, manufacturing tiny chips, for example? Is that a cost human beings can sustain? The lessons of history feel pretty clear to me. AI, like other revolutionary technologies, will be neither the savior nor the death knell of human flourishing. Its promise depends on the ways we integrate it, the ways we ensure it's easily available and communally owned, and the ways we ensure that its production is sustainable for the earth and its inhabitants. I've given you here a very big picture of our moment. I brought you to the top of the mountain so we could look down at the sweep of history. It's heady up here, and I think well worth the climb, but it's not where we reside most of the time. So I want to leave you with a few practical pieces of advice for making good choices in this crucial and rare moment as we stand astride the past and the future. The first is to stay humble. The technology you're using right now is neither the path to a better world nor the end of all that is good. It's how we use it that matters. Work on that. 2, don't imagine you control the technology from above. Watch instead how your team and your students and young people are using it. Learn from that. and not from an idealized vision of how things should be or how it should be used. Third, preserve the best of literary culture in your own life. You're the caretakers of something that is fragile right now. Make time for writing as a creative pursuit. Read out loud to your children. Stretch your vocabulary and the sources of information on which you rely. Limit your use of these new technologies so it doesn't ruin your more embodied sources of happiness. And finally, embrace the creative potential of AI. If it means the student essay is no longer a good test of understanding, then what can replace it? What kinds of new art forms does this technology open up? What kinds of new insights might we be able to have? What might we be free to do that would improve the quality of our lives? How amazing is it that we should live in this time of true technological transition? Only a few generations in the scope and sweep of human history get to live in these moments. They're very disruptive, they're often very painful. They involve genuine loss. But they also inspire curiosity, enthusiasm. May we rise to our moment. Thank you.
It is exciting to be here. I know our panelists are excited to be here. I would love to start, Rosemary, with you by just asking, what are your reactions to that view of history? How does that send your mind going?
Well, absolutely enjoyed everything that I heard and really made us think and realize that we truly are living on the precipice of this change. I think that historical perspective is something that we all have to hold on to, especially at this time when the history and the actual being of higher education is coming into question. And I think that what Dr. Hass has pointed out and made sure that we understand is that we should not be fearful. We should not be fearful of that which is changing, that which is available to us. Instead, and I'm going to insert my own next steps for you, I think the only fear we should have is maybe a little bit of FOMO, a little fear of missing out, because we really don't want to miss out on this opportunity to embrace this. And as I listened to the point about the whole workforce development and all of that piece, we can't just do that for our students. We have to do that for one another as well. We have to think about the workforce development that is right on our own campuses between our faculty and our staff and our coaches. And I have this saying that I talk about a lot, that I have one E word that I hate and one that I love. Now, element is in a place by itself, so have no fear. It is not element. But those two words are enable and empower. And I think that we have a choice right now that we are either going to let AI enable us to just do the work for us, or we're going to figure out how it can empower everyone at every level to perform at the highest possible level that they can and to be the most productive that they can. And I think that what Dr. Hass's comments told us was that, again, don't be fearful of that. Let's keep the human element at the forefront of it all. And let's make sure that we as humans and that the students that we are responsible for educating understand that they need to be accountable and responsible stewards of this information that is now transferable in so many different ways.
They have to be good stewards. We have to be good stewards. Vern, what are your reflections?
Well, I say to my team often that if you don't like change, you're gonna like being irrelevant even less. So it really is incumbent upon us to figure out how we can help our students make sense of this, even as we're making sense of it ourselves. And that's a challenge. I know that all of us have a general idea of what we can do with this tool, this partner, this really scary thing that we're all hoping to understand, but which none of us in this room really do understand quite yet. So, for instance, on my campus, I have purposely not yet put together an AI task force. Lots of other colleges have done that.
Now you've gotten away without having an AI.
Yeah. Well, and the reason for that is one of the things that I worry about is that whenever there's a transformative thing that I've lived through, for instance, the first one I lived through was the handheld calculator. I remember if you opened up a bank account, you would get one for free. That was the prize. And it added, it subtracted, it multiplied, and it divided, and it had 8 digits. It was awesome. And we couldn't use them in school because if you did, we were all going to be stupid. We weren't going to be able to do math anymore. And so the first thing we always get is this reaction against. And then the internet hit, halfway through my teaching career. And what happened then? Well, don't go to the internet for information. It's a really poor source of information. That's what we were teaching. So it's the reaction against change that I want to try to avoid. So I want to live with this a little bit. I want to live with the uncertainty. I want to live with the fear and then work through it. I think the art that we practice as educators is something that we're only going to practice well if we can work through that fear and come out the other side to something that's more transformative.
Well, I love the mentioning of fear. It's such a nice high-level concept and one that I think we can relate to. The narrative Marjorie shared, what did she say? She said, fire, language, writing, and now digital. These are big changes, and overcoming fear requires a good story. It requires leadership. It requires a narrative from those around us, both our own personal leadership in our groups, as well as on campus, that says this change is worth it. This change is scary, but we're going to make it. I guess what I'd love to hear from y'all, and Vern, maybe we'll start with you, go to Rosemary, and then go back to Marjorie. What is the story you're telling on campus that helps folks understand how to approach this fear, how to approach this new thing? What does that story look like on your campus?
Well, I don't know that I have the thing to say that will make people not afraid. And, people often look to the leader of an organization to make them feel calm or to make them feel supported. And that is one of the roles, but that's not something that I can legitimately do yet. I can't predict where we're going to be or how we're going to get there. All I can promise is that I'm going to be there with them, and that as a team, we're going to do our best to figure out how best to make things work. So one of the things that we've figured out, using Element, for instance, is that we can't just throw AI at a bad process. We've got to fix the process first. And that's always a human project, right? So what I'm trying to enact as I lead the college is to show them that the human product is always going to be there. The human process always comes first. And when we fix that, we're going to be able to partner with AI in a way that's going to be maybe a little less frightening and a little more transformative.
So one of the perspectives I have, it was really fun to be here yesterday and listen and hearing an impression of maybe void in that leadership space around this story. Vern, I love your answer to that to some extent, though that you didn't say void, but you said, I can't make you feel less scared, but I can join you in that moment. Rosemary, what is the story that you're telling? How are you doing that? What's that gap?
I think that for Chowan, and I'm sure there are many schools like us in here who have had some downsizing and we've had some challenges. I think that if we are packaging this correctly, which I think that we are right now, people see it as an affordable solution to alleviating some of their day-to-day daunting tasks. Creating that content that would have taken days or weeks or even months now can be done in a split second, but that human element is not removed from it. And so again, we go back to that term of empowerment, that we are empowering them to utilize this resource and not to avoid it, so to speak, like the calculator. Exactly what a great point that was in making that. But we are using it rather than fearing it to see it as a sense of relief and as a partnership. And I think that that's what has to happen. It can't be, and Marjorie, I'm so glad you talked about the silos coming down, because I think that's what is happening with AI. if somebody in the office next to you, the building next to you, has a little bit more experience than you, then let's figure out, how did you get there and how did you get comfortable with that? Let's not be afraid of it. Let's create that content. Let's still talk about it around the table, around the Monday morning meeting table or whatever. But then when we put that product out, we own it, but we didn't have to spend laborious hours getting to it.
So find what is accomplishable with the technology. I love that. Marjorie, as we build on the story question, people in this room, I think, need a vision from leadership. They need something, and we're hearing some of that vision. From your perspective, 650 institutions, lots of presidents, what stories that you're hearing?
I love the way you put this question, and that it's about story and narrative. We learn to tell stories, of course, around the fire, first in symbols and dance, and then when we develop language, with language. So notice how these ancient technologies are still with us. They don't disappear. And I think that's, so much of the fear, I think, comes from people recognizing the truth that things that they care about are going to diminish in importance. That's a terrible feeling, especially if you're at the end of your career, or if you have trained for 32 years to get a PhD in, Shakespearean literature, right? Or what have you. That's a very scary feeling. So I think that's right. We can't be a Pollyanna and pretend that things are not going away. What we can do instead, I think, is help the most fearful among us recognize that they still have very valuable things to share. That professor who is bereft about the fact that there is no way that you can assign an essay and expect students not to use AI, right? They're feeling like this is cheating. They're feeling like a value they have, students creating their own words on the page, is being shunted aside by a new generation. That's heartbreaking. How do we help that professor really rethink, what is it that you care about in student writing? Is it the expressiveness? Is it the passion? Is it the mastery of certain concepts and ideas? And helping them think about ways that those things can still be preserved and assessed and cared about, even if you're using a fancier or different kind of computer or, digital technology than you used to have. These older professors are wisdom holders of an important and fragile piece practices that we will lose if we don't preserve them. So helping them see that they have a valuable role to play in this transition is really important. Plato is interesting because Plato wrote this stuff down. Socrates never wrote anything. Plato is the writer. Plato's the first.
A little ironic, isn't it?
The first guy. No, and I mean, that's why he knew. He's the first, the equivalent is he's the first guy doing it with AI. And he knew this would change everything. That's why he writes about that. We know this will change everything. We're on that cusp. We have to value the past and the future.
So I want to go down to the institutional story here a little bit around what's actually happened for the three groups represented here, what the adoption pathway has looked like. Y'all are here because you're representing good progress in this conversation, even if it's incomplete progress. Would love to hear, Rosemary, we'll start with you. What's the adoption pathway there for you? A little bit of institutional introduction might be helpful for the group as well. Tell us a little bit about AI adoption for you.
So I've been at Chowan less than a year and a half and arrived there with my colleague, Shelley Green, who is here. And we arrived there having been handed a set of numbers that didn't look anything like what we saw when we got there. I'm sure everybody is shocked at that. Enrollment numbers were very different when we drilled down and all of that. Some budgetary issues, again, very unique to Chowan, I understand. But what I want to say is that we came in there eyes wide open, knowing that we had to look and we had to find out where's the nonfiction part of this story, so to speak. So we had the fictional part, We knew the history. We're blessed by the history. As Marjorie pointed out, we must learn from that and be informed by that. But moving forward, we realized that there was a disconnect between two critical parts of that campus, and that was the admissions team and the students. And so we needed our students who were there to tell us, why are you here? Why did you choose this? How did we communicate with you? And when we found out, as we were not surprised, that a majority of our students are on the athletic side. We're a small private institution located near a whole bunch of beaches out on the eastern part of North Carolina, but they came there because they wanted to wear a number on their chest and their name on their back. Okay, so how do we change that to be that you want to be here because it's an institution where you fit the mission? And so we used the whole idea of mission fit, and with Element, that brought that right in, how we can communicate with them, how we can create that content, how we can personalize that content. And with Shelley and I arrived our Vice President for Business and Finance, who thinks that geofencing should be illegal, and we told him, just sit back, it's okay. Now he's understanding that, especially within the world of AI. So we're not just talking to people, we're talking to people about what we know interests them, and we're able to draw that out. And I think that's been the shift, and engaging the students in the process, that's been invaluable to us, and that was a disconnect.
So you stayed student focused. You found champions in an area that was willing to move forward. This room is full of champions, and I think to some extent they're suffering because they are the champions and the early adopters on your campus, right? You're pushing forward in a culture that isn't ready. Part of what you're saying is this is how it works, right? We find champions, we push forward, we lean on mission and on values, and then we let AI empower that piece. Vern, what about you?
Well, I'm glad you're pointing out that everyone in this room is suffering, because I think sometimes the people on my campus think that they're the only ones suffering because they work for me. We really needed something like this. When I got to the campus, this is my third year at Johnston Community College, comprehensive community college, just a little outside of Raleigh. Enrollment had been kind of stable to down for a long period of time, and it looked like it was on an uptick. And so it occurred to me that what we really needed to do was to do a better job connecting with our students before they became our students. I know how irritated I get when I order something on Amazon and it doesn't show up in 2 hours. And I think that's where our students live. They expect us to know what they want without them having to tell us. They expect us to have the thing in the place where they look, not where we keep it. And so we just needed to ramp that up. After the first year, our fall enrollment year to year was up 14%, which sounds awesome, except that in North Carolina, bless its heart, I've learned to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get paid for those students next year. The next fall, we were up again about 15%. And then the legislature went home without passing a budget because they had feelings. So I had 30% more students on campus, the same money I had a couple of years ago. And without AI being able to step in and help us, we were going to be in big trouble. We made it through. And we're able to do things for our students now that we weren't doing before, partly because we were forced to do something. But now our students can call us after hours and get answers. They can go onto our chat bot after hours and get answers. And they love to do that because they really want to ask us questions at 11 o'clock, and none of us are on campus then. So it's really been remarkable for us. As I look towards the fall, in 3 years, we're probably going to be up between 40 and 50%, depending on how you count students. So we are really, part of it is what we're doing with Element. We're doing a million things. If I had known all of this was going to work so well, I wouldn't have done them all, honestly. But one of the things that we're able to do now is to step up to the level of the expectations that students are bringing to us. And I think that the more we can do that, the more we're going to be able to really fulfill our promise. So that's what I'm trying to force.
Part of the value here to me is helping folks appreciate the challenges from different positions in the institution. So probably not many people think in the role that they might have, gosh darn, the North Carolina budget cycle is 2 years behind, and that's a big struggle. You're in the position where that's the challenge that you have. Marjorie, what's the adoption story going on at CIC or broader?
These are, again, really profound questions, and it's a pleasure to share the stage with such talented presidents talking about their impact. Vern, I have to say, I do have a little crush on your socks, your Ruth Bader Ginsburg I Dissent socks. So it's that, yes.
Yeah.
Always good.
My daughter loves these socks too.
That's good. But one of the other things about technological change is it doesn't all happen at the same rate. When technologies change slowly, we learn how to use those technologies from our parents. So I bet everybody in this room learned to cook from their mom or maybe their dad, because the cooking technology doesn't change very fast. You may have learned to drive. You probably learned to drive from your parents. When technologies move quicker, we learn from our peers. I learned how to use the email from a friend down the hall in graduate school, and my sister taught me how to use the internet. When it changes really fast, we learn from our children and from those younger than us. And this technology is changing so fast. Notice it's the students that are driving it, right? What you said is we had to learn how to meet the expectations of our students. And this is, again, a radically different kind of thing. Most of us come into higher education thinking we are the experts and the students do not know. And our job is to impart knowledge to them. When technology is changing this fast, our job changes. Our job is to create conditions under which students can use and grasp and flourish with these technologies. Our job is to help them use them in ways that are healthy and positive instead of, say, addictive and dangerous. Our job is to show them what these technologies can free them up to do and to know and to achieve, not necessarily to own the mastery of the tools. And that's a huge mindset shift. So I think many of our CIC presidents that are seeing the most positive reactions on campus are ones where they are creating an atmosphere of play and joy and excitement around co-learning, students and faculty members co-creating what's happening in the classroom, students and admissions counselors co-creating how we're going to communicate with each other. And if you can create that kind of joy and excitement and help your people understand that you're going to evaluate them on their ability to do that, rather than their ability to know every single thing about this technology so they are the owners of it, I think you get much better results. At CIC, Matt really developed an AI network. We have hundreds of institutions that are participating, and we provide opportunities for them to learn together so that they can create that same atmosphere and feeling on campus.
Yeah, and if you're an independent college, by the way, and you're not a member of our AI network, you should give us a call. Make sure you join our AI network. Let's talk for a moment about challenges. The role of the president is often to cast a vision. That's where we started, right? Because it's the presidential role, and it's a role that you all speak from. Once that vision is cast, all these challenges, right? The headwinds show up for it. I would love to hear just generally some quick comments on either operational or philosophical challenges that you are seeing. I'd love to hear your quick response to that, and I'm going to dig in a little bit more. And so, Marjorie, do you want to start maybe with challenges, operational or philosophical, that you are seeing, and then we'll come this direction?
Well, I've talked a lot about philosophical challenges, so maybe I'll go to the practical, operational now. I think one of the biggest challenges that institutions face is that other than maybe the largest and wealthiest institutions, every other institution really has to think about the bets they're placing. You don't get 5 chances. When you partner with a provider, you are putting a lot of trust in them, both in their product and in their business model. I think one of the biggest operational challenges is that a lot of the companies peddling these things are very fly by night. They don't have a sustainable business model. They don't have a model that involves customers or profit, right? They have venture capitalist backed models, which are very short term thinking. It's really important to find companies like Element that are in it for the long haul and have proven that they will stick with our institutions. So that is a market failure right now that we've got to help those institutions or those organizations rise to the top and be sustainable.
Thank you, Marjorie. Vern, operational challenges that you see with adoption or philosophical challenges on your campus?
I'll see if I can mix it. The challenge, I think, in the classroom is very real, and you know, we've talked about it a little bit already. I think the other side of that, though, is that what AI has done is kind of draw the curtain back and expose what was really a bunch of really pretty awful teaching, honestly. If you were relying on really easy evaluations and not putting a lot of thought into where they were coming from, then shame on you. And I think many of our institutions are getting exactly what we deserve. We should have been paying more attention all along to how and what we were teaching the students, and how we were evaluating what they were doing in the classroom. Were they actually getting the learning outcomes that we promised them? So this is forcing colleges to do backwards design and to rethink all of their curricula. And I think it is a marvelous thing. It's the best thing that I've seen come out of AI so far. This is why I say that fear is not necessarily a bad thing. You should be very afraid. And I think at some point it's going to make you a better teacher.
So talking about curriculum a little bit, I walked into a huge curriculum change, a traditional liberal arts institution that changed to what I would consider more of creating skills for a lifetime and meeting the students where they were. So we went from traditional scheduling to 2 classes at a time for 7 weeks, 4 days a week off in the middle, then 2 more classes at a time for 7 weeks. So you end up with 16 hours at the end of the semester, which is very typical for a regular semester, if you will. So you have 2 sessions within that. So 2 at a time for 7 weeks. How is that meeting the students where they are operationally? Because with COVID, it was much more self-paced and it was much more immersive learning and kind of challenging yourself to learn more. This has worked extremely well. We have seen a significant uptick in our GPA, a significant downward trend with our failures. And what we're seeing is that some of that bad teaching was exposed and replaced by, fortunately, a much stronger relationship with the professor and with the peers in the class. So instead of writing that 5-paragraph essay, in fact, Shelley and I were talking before we came up here, ours went into more product design, more presentation, lots of workshop styles, lots of guest speakers and that type of thing. Now, I will tell you, if you're located in Murfreesboro, North Carolina, and you're teaching the same class 4 days a week, it's not real easy to find an adjunct, okay? So our full-time professors are extremely pleased with what they're seeing. We've created a student success model around this. And so how does that all tie back to Element and the use of Element? Because we're creating our brand and we're able to address that brand promise with the proof of the outcomes. So that's sort of curriculum-wise where we went.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions. So for folks who are curious and want to ask this panel something, if you can ask it in a succinct way, get ready and go ahead and, I guess, raise your hand, and some mic folks will help find it. Is that how we want to do that? Yeah, just raise your hand and someone will come to you with a mic. But as that is happening, I have a question I want to ask this crowd as we're looking for a question. The question I want to ask, having been here yesterday, is operationally on the ground. I want to go back to the fact that a lot of people in this room really are the early adopters on their campus. So yesterday I watched some sessions and the element folks are so far ahead, brilliantly ahead, right? That even in the room of these early adopters were sometimes glazed over watching the element folks, right? And I imagine on our campuses, when we're talking, the folks who are watching us, their eyes are glazing over, right? And they're frustrated at the limitations of the structures that are not yet in place that Marjorie mentioned. They're frustrated perhaps because their VP has purchased this and is encouraging pursuit of it, but their president isn't, or no one else is talking about it, or other people don't have buy-in. This is, I think, some of the experience of the people in this room. And so I would love to hear, like, what is the advice to this group around being the early adopters? What does that look like? How would you give this encouragement to this group? Because the sushi was great, but they'll be back home soon and the sushi won't be there. So what's the advice and the thoughts around that?
Well, I'll be happy to start. If your president is not completely on board, and if your president is not talking to his or her board about this kind of a project, you're wasting your time. You really, if there's not real support from the top and real understanding from the folks who set policy, it's just not going to be worth it. So if that doesn't happen, make that happen before you do anything else.
And I'll grab that a little and say, there might be the idea of, for the bubble that you are in, what is possible, right? And so if your vice president or your senior director is allowing that experimentation, just understand that there will be limitations to how far that experimentation can go without full campus buy-in, and know that you're a trailblazer demonstrating what's possible in hopes for future buy-in from the leadership. Rosemary, what do you?
Yeah, when Vern mentioned the board, that is so critically important. The board does not need to be operators of this, but they do need to be advocates. And in order for them to advocate for what it is, because of funding and because of across the board, buy-in and all of that, they need to be advocates. And to do that, they need to understand, what is this system? What is Element telling us? How is it determining our best steps and our priorities? How's it helping establish our priorities like nothing else can do? And it's there. And the other thing that I would say that I think is important for onboarding all of this is, everybody doesn't have to be an expert with every aspect of it. It goes back to what Marjorie was saying about who taught us how to use the internet, who taught us how to use email and all of that. I don't know about you all, but I love my smartphone, but I probably use 10% of what it can possibly do. All right. So if you have 10 people and everybody figures out 10% of what Element can do and how it can happen, then we're going to be functioning at 100%. And we can cross train and we can pivot and we can do what we need to do. And that's what the board needs to understand, is that everybody understands their lane, but they're also pretty comfortable putting on the blinkers and moving back and forth across those lanes.
I think there's going to be a poster with your quotes on it soon for Element. Is there a question in the room? I really can't see. So if there's a question and someone has a mic, shout it out. All right. So let us move to close. Is there a question?
Yeah.
Oh, please, just shout it out. Yep.
Sorry, no question over here. I saw a hand that wasn't raised.
False alarm.
Oh, false alarm.
You want to make up a question?
So
Matt's questions were so good.
So let's do this. Final words of advice. And as much as possible, thinking about the adopters on campus, the folks who are in the assistant director ranks, the folks who are moving this technology forward, the folks who are champions of it. What's the advice? And I think we'll start with you, Rosemary, and we'll go this way, and we'll end with our keynote opener. What's the advice for folks in this room? And I'd love to start. What do you think, Rosemary?
Don't be afraid to ask for help, but also don't be afraid to share what you know. And I think that the real key for that, and we talk about this with our students all the time, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if you truly care about the overall outcomes of this entire admissions process, this thing that fuels all of us, this thing that fuels the future, so to speak, you have to care. You have to know as well, but don't be afraid to ask for the support that you need. Don't be afraid to identify if you see a silo that's maybe not coming down as quickly. If you see a roadblock, figure out how to put the detour signs up. figure out how to work around them in a respectful and collegial manner, but don't be afraid to ask for those. And again, don't forget, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and you have to be invested in the overall larger process.
Love it. Thank you, Vern.
Set aside time in your day just to play with the tools. So my mom got a new car, and it had lots of buttons. And she said, I don't need to know what any of those buttons do. I start the car, I drive the car, I go to Piggly Wiggly, it's all good. I started pushing the buttons and said, Mom, do you realize there's a heat seat? If you click this button, your seat warms up. And she said, oh, that's lovely. Maybe I should start pushing these buttons. And I said, not while you're driving, but yeah. So you don't know what you're going to be able to do with these things yet. None of us in this room do. You just need to sit there and play with it and be creative and trust that you're probably not going to break it. It'll probably still be there when you're done pushing the buttons. And you may find out that you can do something really amazing because you sat there and did it. So I tell all my team, in your calendar, set aside at least an hour a week where you don't take meetings, you don't do phone calls, you turn the email binger off, and you just live with a thing and be creative with it. So I'd say just sit and play.
Yeah, great about. They're very similar to what I was going to say, that, you have to find the joy in things. When things are fun and joyous, and when they feel creative and like you're using parts of yourself, you're naturally drawn to those things. And the more we make it sort of, a harsh test of something, the less we are. This is why students write so badly, because we don't teach them to enjoy writing. We teach it as though it's somehow a test. And of course, obviously, if you can get it written faster, you would, right? I don't use AI to write because writing is very fulfilling for me. It's joyous in that painful, I hate it and I love it way, right? So I don't write things using AI, but I do use AI now for other tasks. And I use them in ways that makes me feel empowered and excited, not like it's, taking something away. So make that spirit of joy and play, draw attention to where it is working, water those flowers. And the less time you can spend trying to convince the most recalcitrant group that they must get on board, the happier you will be, right? Spend a lot of time with the enthusiasts, spend a lot of time with them, I don't know. And, as I said this morning over breakfast, dinosaurs did not evolve into mammals. The dinosaurs died out. Why? Because the environment changed so that it was more supportive of the mammals. So your job is to create an environment that is supportive of the people who are inclined to move in the direction you want to move. And that is always a good leadership strategy.
Well, panel, thank you for sharing your joy, your caring, and your encouragement to push buttons. We will continue to do so in this room. Y'all, thank you for being part of this conversation today. We appreciate it.